Yeah, we were making an album at Sound Emporium. Our pal Ken Coomer was producing, our bud Charlie Bracco was engineering, and my band and I were in the studio there. But we moved over to East Nashville right before our first son was born. And I had a little motor scooter that I was tooling around town on and left the studio and was coming back home. Yeah, right on Main Street and 7th, right there where the MAPCO is. Yeah, a 15-passenger van coming towards town, just turned full speed. In front of me, never saw me until my face went through his passenger window, he said. Yeah, so I mean, I don't remember much of that. I remember waking up on the street. I couldn't see, but I remember kind of bright lights. But yeah, they put me in an ambulance and got me to Vanderbilt, all of those things. I mean, we can get as specific. You tell me what you want to know.
Were you wearing a helmet?
I was wearing a helmet, which is really the only reason I'm still here.
When those things happen, I don't understand how some people survive it and other people don't.
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting thing. You know, it cemented my non-beliefs in the ER. You know, when you wake up in an ER and you're, you know, in this round room full of people that are, you know, in the worst possible states that you can be in. And that was a part of it that was really wild to me. It was like, what is, you know, there's 8 people up here. These 4, you know, what are the chances of me not, you know, getting a spinal injury or whatever, and there's this other guy or this other girl that did. Yeah, those moments were really...
Did you understand when you woke up in ER what was happening?
Yeah, so it was a few days. I was awake when I got to the hospital. They put me in a coma. My leg had broken a double compound fracture, so my femur had come out, and then a part of my femur had broken out in the middle. Oh, so there's a big open wound on my leg. I had lost so much blood they couldn't do surgery, so they had to sedate me for about 48 hours to get my blood pressure back to where they could do any surgery. So my leg just had to stay open for a while. So when I was out, I was obviously intubated. There were all sorts of other broken bones in my upper body and shoulders and ribs and face and all that. But yeah, I woke up 3 or 4 days later. They had finally done a surgery on my leg. I had these concussions in my eyes where I couldn't see. I could only see just a little bit of my peripheral vision, kind of. So when I woke up, I you know, had a tube down my throat. I couldn't figure out where I was, and I had been out for, you know, since the night I'd gotten to the hospital. And I remember flailing around a little, and there was a nurse that came over, and you know, I couldn't talk, obviously, with the tube, but I remember motioning for a pen and paper, and she brought me a pen over, and I had written "wife, kid?" ? And she told me, she said, "Oh, you're at Vanderbilt, you know, emergency room. You're in the hospital. You were in a wreck by yourself. Your wife and kid, they're fine. They've been here visiting." You know, my kid hadn't, but my wife had. And
so you weren't even sure if your wife and kid were with you when whatever.
Yeah, because I didn't know what had happened, and that was awful. You know, but I do question, you know, what would have if they had said that it had been something really bad. You know, I mean, there was a lot of wanting to get better in that moment, just knowing that they were okay. But then that was really hard too, because then my wife, because I hadn't been awake, nobody had talked to me or anything, and my wife came later, because the ER, you've only got certain visiting hours that you're able to come up there, you know, each day. And so my mom and dad and my wife would sort of take turns coming in and sitting with me. And my wife got there that day and had seen my handwriting, you know, and so that was the first time where she felt like, okay, he's been awake, which was great, and asking about her. So, yeah, that was pretty emotional. And then, you know, that's just a series of surgeries, and then you step down from the ER on the top floor, and there's life flight coming in every 20 minutes with somebody else. I mean, it was a really stressful time for everybody involved. But I mean, a huge testament to the people at Vanderbilt. I mean, they just do incredible work over there, and over the next few weeks, I mean, they've pieced everything together, and they pretty instantly start you on physical therapy and all of these things. I remember, at one point with the multiple shoulders and collarbones and all broken and shattered, and one of my exercises was they had the Cracker Barrel game, the pegs.
Yeah.
And it was like, even though you're hurting, you're so messed up, you're in a wheelchair, and you're thinking, this is so stupid. Like, you're gonna make me, they were like, 10 times, can you take all of the pegs out and put them back in? And I remember thinking, like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But I remember on the 9th time going like, I am exhausted. And like the 10th peg goes in, and they take me to a room, and I was just like, oh. And that's when that was a great moment for me of like, okay, trust the process. Like, these people know what they're doing. But yeah, it was a long, long road to recovery.
Was there infection problems? I heard with compound fractures that there's like a really serious chance of infection.
Yeah, that's obviously a huge concern. They had me on so many antibiotics. Luckily, that wasn't the case. I did get one of the worst bits of pain. They had done the first, I had so many surgeries over the whole year, but one of those first rounds, they had set some stuff and stitched me back up at least for the first time. And I had to lay in the bed so long, I got some sort of skin infection just on my back, like bed sores.
Yeah.
And that was brutal. I remember at that point, not knowing what it was, but that was one of the moments I remember crying, and calling my wife and just being like, something is wrong. I don't know what it is. And, all of these other things you could see. It was like, well, this obviously hurts for a reason. This is swollen because this is broken. It was like, I don't know, but there's something wrong with my back. And, then again, they worked it out. But yeah, that was the only real infection part. Thankfully, none of the internal stuff was ever a problem.
How long did it take to where you were out of the hospital and almost having a almost normal life?
Out of the hospital was a couple of months, and then it was another 6 months of, you went from, I was in a wheelchair for 2 or 3 months with big braces, couldn't move my legs at all, had to just go, lay in the bed, roll around in a wheelchair. That was for months, and then you go to a walker for months, and then you go to a cane. So it was just a step-down process that was probably 6 months, I guess, 8 months. It gets a little blurry in there. And then, it was like, I don't have especially at that time, it's not like as a singer-songwriter, it's like, I can just take a year off, no problem.
Yeah.
So,
That's what I was just thinking, as the bills keep coming.
Yeah, and we were fortunate. We were able to just sort of make some things work. And then, I had to start touring again. In a more perfect world, I would have been able to really rehab and get myself back to 100% before I had to go back and work. But, that's not the world we live in. I had a kid at home, and I had to go out and tour. I did a whole tour where, I just had to sit down. So we marketed it as a, kind of a welcome back. That's the beauty, is that people understood what it was, but it was real weird to go back out and, sit in a folding chair at the front of the stage and just play an acoustic guitar. And that was an interesting experience. Yeah. Yeah, where it was just like everything was accident survivor Will Hoge. It was, I'd been on the road right before that. Jason Isbell and I had done a big U.S. tour all over. And the fact that either of us survived that is a whole nother episode of this show. But, it was, and then right after this is when he started getting sober, and we had laughed that there was a point then where we were doing some stuff together, and just every article was, former drive-by trucker, surviving alcohol, Jason Isbell, rock and roll singer, survives fatal, potentially fatal crash. It was just like everything was about that for a while. Yeah, and it's just...
Somebody please change that Wikipedia.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything else that we could talk about? Yeah, like you think about robbing a bank or something. It's like, what can I do that doesn't hurt anybody that will trump this headline? But yeah, it's... I'm glad that it was the headline of surviving it, not the opposite. So, yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
But yeah, you do sort of look at the thing again and go like, God, we're still using this in the quote. So.
My dad rode a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And he was a Harley guy.
Yeah.
Had a couple wrecks, had 3 if I remember right, and they weren't serious. I never wanted to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah.
But I definitely wanted a Vespa.
Yeah.
Right around this time.
Yeah.
Chuck Mead had one, and I'm like, this is great, man.
It's the best.
I can go around East Nashville. This will be great. And,
it's so great.
I think I got it out of my system when I heard about your wreck.
Yeah, it was weird. And then it was because my dad has he grew up, could never get a motorcycle. Parents wouldn't let him and all those things. And he divorced my mom and, in his adult years was like, I'm getting a motorcycle, in full midlife crisis mode. And he's always been really great about it and responsible and, rides and did all of that. And I was still in a wheelchair. I was back home at our first place over in East Nashville up by the river. And he rode over on his motorcycle one day. And our oldest was just old enough to, to talk and all at that point. But, Pop came in, parked his motorcycle and walked in. And it was funny. Our oldest, walked up to him and was very confused. He was like, Papa, why do you ride a motorcycle when your son almost got killed on one? And it was because you watched my dad's face. He was like, I don't. And he's really never, like he rode it back home and I'm not sure he's ridden it maybe but one time since then. And he's just sits in his shed. He's like.
Your dad being a photographer and taking David Olney's album cover.
Yeah.
I was friends with David.
Yeah.
What do you remember?
The Deeper Well album cover, Dad shot it at the bar in Brown's Diner, and the framed album hung on the wall at our house, from the day the record came out until my, late 20s when my parents got divorced, and I think it still hangs at my dad's house currently.
Was your dad friends with David?
No, he was just a photographer in town. And Nashville was still so small at that point. It was like he just was a guy that had camera equipment. It was a photographer, and they were like, "We need a photographer for this record," and they hired him to do it. And but it was cool, because my dad had also been a frustrated musician, wanted to be a musician growing up, and had been in bands here in Nashville, and kind of had always dreamed of something bigger in that realm. And then started having kids and kind of did the honorable thing of giving all of that up and just getting a square job. So photography had sort of become his outlet for any sort of creativity. And so getting to tie that back into music was really, you could tell was real special for him. He was real proud of that work. Yeah. And obviously, David's songwriting in that record musically is a cool thing to be a part of too. It's not like it was just some Yahoo high school band shooting their album cover. I mean, it was a really...
It's probably David's biggest album too.
Yeah, and really at that time, there was what Steve Earle talks about was the Nashville's credibility scare or whatever.
Credibility scare.
Yeah, and that was a huge part of it. I mean, I think that there was Steve kind of at the head of that, but then so many people were coming around going, okay, what if we do find a couple of these like singer-songwriters telling real stories? And so seeing that, and waking up and seeing that every day was really probably more consistently inspirational than a lot of the other things that you would think of in my life too.
Yeah. Was it David's idea to shoot it at Brown's?
I don't know. I'll have to ask. I don't...
David lived over by Brown's, and just so you guys know, Brown's Diner, a little rail car.
Yeah,
kind
old
of
rail
trailer.
car. Mm-hmm.
And you could walk in during the day back when, and there'd be Don Everly sitting at the bar,
Yeah.
Nancy Griffith eating a cheeseburger, John
Yeah.
Prine. you
Yeah.
know, and it was not a rarity. You'd walk in and that's where these people hung out.
Yeah, and it still is such a cool hang. You know, that's one of those. You know, my kids are 18 and 14 now, and we'll go through these sort of what old Nashville was like. You know, and there's places that you go, and some don't exist anymore. Lots don't exist anymore. Other ones we'll take them to and go like, "This place was incredible," and you go to it now, and you're like, was it incredible? Or was it just the only place that you could get tacos at that, you know, in 1990? But Brown's is one that still holds up. Like the food is still great. The hang is still cool. So yeah, it's still a place. If you visit and you're cool, you can still go there. Yeah.
I don't remember the name of the actor, but the guy that played Ernest T. Bass on Andy Griffith's show.
Yeah.
They had, the mayor had Ernest T. Bass Day in Nashville. And there's a picture in the Tennessean of the guy in the Ernest T. Bass getup with a rock.
Getting ready to throw it through Miss Wiley's
He
window.
threw it through the window at Brown's Diner. And if you go there and ask to see the rock, they still have it behind the counter.
I did not
there.
know this. This is great news. Okay. That's good. That's where I always meet when Dan Baird and I have our lunch dates. That's where we still go. So now I'll know to ask to see Ernest T's rock next time I'm there.
You completed the circle where you had an album cover shot at Brown's.
I did. Well, it's my first sort of promo headshot as a solo artist. Literally in the same exact spot as the Olney album cover. Yeah.
Was that tribute for your dad shot it?
He shot it too. Yeah. I mean, it was just kind of one of those things. One, it was a little lazy and it was just easy because we know this spot and it looks cool. And then the other thing was like, you know, I always like the look of that album cover. So it's kind of like, let's just, we got to have a spot to do pictures. We'll do it there. Yeah. And that still hangs on the wall at my mom's house. So, yeah. Yeah, I was putting together, you know, like so many people, I don't know that you ever start thinking like, I'm going to be a solo singer-songwriter. Like I was going to be in bands, be a singer in a band, write songs in bands. And bands always fall apart. And after the last one where I was really thought like, this is the one, this has got legs, this is gonna make it. And then, you know, a couple of the guys go and do other things and you're just left holding the bag again. I was like, I'm gonna be a solo artist. I'm doing it this way. And I had put together my first band, my first show at the End over on Elliston Place. And the bass player, Billy Mercer, who was playing with me at the time, he knew Dan, and Dan had just come to the show. And of course, I had known of Dan, you know, for years. As a kid from the South, I mean, the Georgia Satellites were really one of those bands that you looked at like, one, they were great. Two, this is a North Star for escaping all of the shit that we want to get away from. And, you know, the first bands I was ever in, I mean, we were playing Keep Your Hands to Yourself and all of those things. So, I mean.
And the girls would all get on the dance.
Oh, yeah, man. And, you know, and his first solo record was a record that I had played incessantly. I mean, I knew that record front and back. So I just thought it was cool that he was there. And then he came afterwards and we swapped information and talked. And he had, I think at that point, too, was looking at, he'd produced a record or two and was kind of looking at diversifying his portfolio and wanted to talk about producing a record, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. And so I said, you know, no. And we said, well, we'll stay in touch. And he just had really nice things to say about the songs that he had heard that night and all of that. And then I found another bass player and drummer was putting together a band, and we needed a guitar player. And you know those dumb moments when you're younger where you're like, I'll just ask. You know, you're just so stupid and naive that you don't go like, why would I ask? One, he was a grown man at the time who had massive success and toured the world. And, you know, I'm like, hey, my band is gonna make $200 a night. We're gonna play a bunch. We're gonna ride around in a Ford Explorer with a U-Haul trailer. Would you wanna come play in my band? That's not exactly how I pitched it, but I mean, I did. I just called and asked. I was like, "Hey, man, and not the production thing. Not ready for that, but would love to talk to you about. Would you want to play guitar?" And he didn't bat an eye, and I was honestly pretty shocked. And he came, and we started rehearsals, and it was just, I mean, it was just an embarrassment of riches for me. I mean, to like look around and go like, I have this guy in my band for my first like real shows. And then we toured a bunch, and he was just always incredible. I learned, it was like just graduate level education of rock and roll and the road and how things work. And then we made the first record, and he was involved in that. We did it between Nashville and Memphis and back and forth, and he was just totally involved in all of it. And then when we got to the point where signed the big record deal, and another thing that I really respected him, he was just like, "Hey, I've seen this movie before, and this roller coaster gets crazy." And he said, "And I am not," at the time, I think he's probably 45 or 50, and he was like at 50, whatever it was, I'm not the guy to take this ride with you. He was like, "We need to find you another guitar player, and I'll just stay as a friend and a fan." And he's just legitimately been one of my go-to people for 30 years at this point.
Even a mentor.
Yeah, very much so. Probably more than he realizes. But yeah, I look to him as, just a constant class act, musically and off stage too. I mean, just shows up at the right times, cares about people in the right way. And I'm just, and he's entering a new chapter of his life, getting ready to get married again. And the last time I saw him, we played together earlier this year. He came and did a show because we did a anniversary release for Carousel. And that was just a super highlight. Again, getting him back on stage and feeling good about it, and watching him light up, falling in love again. I just am tickled to have him any part of my life at this point.
He's that crazy mix of, a very rare mix of being really level-headed about life and day-to-day and people, and having this insane belief in rock and roll at the same time.
Still, and I love that.
Very legit and real. In life.
And that balance is just such a beautiful, because really for rock and roll to be great, there has to be. I'm watching it with my kids are 18 and 14. Like I said, my youngest has got a show Saturday in Nashville. Like he's got bands now, and like watching those kids in the garage, and realizing that there's a part of that. If you're gonna do this, you can never lose that. You can drop it for a minute, and we all do, but like there's got to be a point where you pick it up and dust it back off and go, okay, I cherish and hold on to this thing. And Dan is that guy. I mean, still, at whatever he is, 94 years old, or no, he still gives it the reverence that it should have, and that's really inspirational. Yeah.
He talks about. One thing I love to hear Dan talk about is how he's more interested in people trying for something, and the falling flat on their face and missing it is better than if they'd have played it safe and done it spotlessly. And I really like that ideology.
Yeah, and he really helped me. My own artistic ideas. I come very much from a very traditional singer-songwriter. Like, it's a down the middle, it's a rock band to write songs. It's not anything. I don't fancy myself as doing something that's like, this is brand new, no one's ever heard of this concept. It's a rock and roll band. But so I come from a very middle ground place with that, but live performance, I've always felt like I like more of the punk rock attitude, where you really do have like, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. This may blow up. And Dan was a really great shepherd early on for me to show me, how to walk that tightrope. And we used to talk about, he gave me the quote that I still use today, which is, what we do when we do it well, it's like NASCAR, because no one goes to NASCAR because they want to see a race. You go because there's a chance they're going to crash. And that's what I feel like I want my shows to be. I want my records to be in some ways. Like if there's not a little bit of that high wire act, and it's not an act, I guess if there's not the high wire drama, what's the point? You can listen to the record if you want to hear people just play perfectly or not take those chances. Yeah, so the leaping for it, and going like, oh, almost had it. It's like, that's still pretty beautiful. And then you dust yourself back up, and you get up and you do it again. And that's Dan's sort of MO. He's the grand poobah of all that. You don't say this to the people that, again, you don't want to come here and visit, but the people that understand a little bit about what we do, like when they'll go like, if I was gonna come to Nashville, like where do I go to? And it's like Lowe's, or Whole Foods, or the elementary school pickup line, where they're all dropping off their kids. Yeah. Like it's just, there's such a normal existence to being a musician in this town. And that was hugely helpful growing up here, because you realize like, oh, you can just, like, I never wanted to be a star. Fortunately, that's worked out for me. But yeah, like it was like, okay, there's Vince Gill at the basketball game, watching his daughter as a high school cheerleader. Like, okay, that's cool. He was just on the Grammys last night playing guitar, and now here he is just eating popcorn. Like, that's a hell of a revelation to get when you're growing up.
I say this to people. I don't think I've ever said it on camera, so I apologize if this...
this is going to be good.
Well, if this rubs somebody wrong, I don't mean it to, but I think that if we all lived on a military base,
okay,
there are things that the people in your lives would understand about the shared experience and what their day-to-day lives would be like, rather than we wouldn't understand because we don't live in that community. Or if we were coal miners, we lived in a coal town. There's just that thing. I think there's something like that with Nashville. Like we have never met before today, but I feel like each of us understand a little bit about certain parts of our lives. Yeah,
we speak a similar language, and I don't just mean the back and forth, but yeah, I mean like our experiences are a whole lot more alike than lots of other folks. And you start to realize too, like we know a lot of the same people, and it's like, yeah, this is a pretty easy way to understand.
And that phone call home after you had a really, really fun gig, like 5 states away, and then you hear about the rough day at home and you feel guilty about out having fun.
Yeah.
Those are those things. There's also people, you said something about friends saying, what do you do when you come to Nashville? And where should we go? And you're right. The amazing part isn't necessarily some venue that you go hang out at. It's going to Kroger and seeing Reggie Young.
Yeah.
And like, that's the guy. And either you know who that is or you don't. And most people don't. But that's what I try to tell people. It's really kind of hard to just show up a couple days and go to a venue and understand why people like day-to-day life here.
Well, and it's funny too, folks will come in or, go to, there was a point where they did a program at one of my kids' classes, and we went in and somebody was from out of town. There was a family, I can't remember who it was, maybe it was my mother-in-law or somebody, but from Indiana, and came down and they were like, oh, this is crazy. But, it's like in the class, it's, there's Jack White's bass player's daughter and Taylor Swift's drummer's daughter, and then 3 other songwriters' daughters and sons. And you just realize, like, this is just at the public school. This isn't the fancy pants. It's like, yeah, man, this is just, and then there's front of house people and guitar techs. It's so much bigger than the sort of TMZ, and I love it here because nobody's following people around with cameras. It's just, that's not a thing. It's like we all kind of get it. It's like, there they are at the grocery. maybe you tip your hat and sort of go like, oh, Reggie Young, like, okay. You know, like I know.
Yeah.
He gives you the nod and you're like, cool, I did my thing. Like, we're good. I love that.
The first time I ever heard about you was when my buddy Josh Baker was promoting a show that you were playing somewhere in Wanamaker, Indiana, which is where I grew up. And you're the only person I know who's ever played in Wanamaker, Indiana.
One of one.
Do you have any memories of what that gig was?
Not a ton. I mean, other than the Josh connection, because he was just one of those early adopters. You know, that's one of my favorite things about the longevity in this business is like the people that are still out doing it. You know, the people, and sometimes their jobs changed or what have you. But Josh was one of those that on like the very first record I ever made, he probably did our first Indianapolis show and then has just brought us back for random shows, you know, for almost 30 years at this point. Yeah. So I remember that connection more than I do the show itself, to be honest.
If I can put Josh over here, I've known him since he's about 18 years old.
Okay.
And he grew up out there. But so Josh has a long history of this where he put on Sturgill in front of like 5 or 6 people somewhere and then kept I was at the first Avett Brothers Indianapolis show. It was at the Monkey's Tail in Broad Ripple. It was a restaurant that played outside to a small crowd. He just he promoted that show, and then last year he promoted a show in the arena the Pacers play in, of the Avett Brothers. Did the same thing with Billy Strings. First show, small crowd, just did an arena show in Indianapolis. So there are those people out there, and we're kind of lucky that as we travel, we get to meet those people. I always say you don't put on an Otis Gibbs show because you think you're going to make a lot of money.
Right.
So I meet the nicest damn people in the world. And it's I have a feeling that at some point you've run into these same situations in a lot of places. Yeah, and
it's part of what this is really all about. I mean, this in a lot of ways for me, like this is my religion. I mean, it is. This is this thing that I still believe in, and I still think it matters. And not just in the arena. That's the other thing. Is like it matters at all the levels, from the arena down to the. I'll go see my son's band play at Dark Matter on Saturday, you know, and that doesn't matter less, you know, and it doesn't matter. I'm 52 years old, and I've been making records a long time, and there are places where we'll play in front of really big, great crowds in great rooms, the kind of places that you would dream of playing as a kid. And then there are, you know, last week played at a barbecue restaurant in Iowa City, you know, and it was great. I mean, you know, it still matters. When you're working with the right people, that's what's great, is it's like, okay, we're all doing this because there's some sort of belief that this matters. And, you know, if sometimes that matters in front of 100 people, sometimes that matters in front of 10,000 people. But that's a cool thing to get to be a piece of, I think.